empowering you through the voice of truth with your host, Dr. Joel Hunter.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Joel Hunter, host of Power Talks, empowering you through the voice of truth. On today's program, we've got Josh Turner. We've got two great guys. You're going to love this. Josh Turner is the lead pastor along with his wife, Becca. I heard her preach, by the way. I got to come back and hear you preach. She was awesome.
Yeah.
Pastor of Celebration Church, Orlando, and Renaud Vanderwright, good Irish name, lead pastor of Mosaic Church in Winter Garden. And they're going to talk about being involved in the community and having really fast-growing churches. I've been to both of these churches. They're wonderful congregation. And so let me just kind of launch into this. Renaud, let's go to you first. Renaud, you're from South Africa.
Yep.
Good Dutch name.
Yep.
You know, 8 kids.
I do.
4 white, 4.
Holy cow.
4
Ethiopian.
Yeah. But just one of the larger, but more community-serving minded congregations really in the country. I mean, you guys are doing so much down there. Did that philosophy of serving outside the walls of a building come with you from South Africa, or was that something, where did you pick that up?
I mean, I think, looking back, I have no doubt that part of it is because I grew up in a space different than the United States, and so I have a perspective, perhaps, that some people growing up here don't have. Living in South Africa with everything that you got to see there during the years of apartheid and some of the inequality that was visibly present in the politics and the reality of the day, and then created a third world dynamic versus a first world dynamic in the same space. So you could be living in a city, look across a road and see legit third world stuff. I think probably shaped a clarity that there's a big world out there that has far less than most of us do, and we ought to be doing something about it. And then encountering the gospel early in my life and Jesus's engagement on planet Earth that was to come and serve. You put those two together, and there's really no way you can walk away from that without saying, we got to do something about this insanity. Otherwise, what are we really doing? So I think it came with me.
Now you've got to, and Josh, I'm about to get to you, so get ready.
No, you're good.
It's going to be a really tough question I ask you. But you've got once a year, you gather in several community ministries into a conference. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We do a conference called Serve the City. It's usually in the early part of the year, and really it's just a space for us to look at our local environment and ask the question, how do we engage everyone that's doing great good in the city into the same space? So instead of us either doubling up on work that we don't need to be or working against each other accidentally, that we can kind of get together and say, how can we serve each other in serving the city so that we can better serve the city? So we do that usually in the early part of the year. We'll be having one coming up, and just engage in conversation, engage in the real issues of the city, and try to do it together.
Great.
That's awesome.
Josh, let me come to you. You've been up and running for 4 years now.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about a little bit of the history of Celebration Church.
Yeah, so Celebration Church was actually started 20 years ago. This Wednesday, we celebrate 20 years in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
And so my pastor moved from Louisiana, started it. I got saved there. I tell everybody, if I'm being completely honest, I got saved on a Sunday hungover from Saturday, and just totally changed my life. And was on staff there for 10 years, thought I would always live in Jacksonville, never thought I'd leave, and God started messing with me about downtown Orlando, and could not get away from it, and fought it really for 3 years because I didn't want to move. And I finally told my wife, I said, if we don't move to Orlando, I said, I'm gonna have to look at Jesus at the end of my life and say, I stayed in Jacksonville because I was comfortable and not because you called me here. And my wife just looked at me and said, wherever you go, I'm with you. And so I went to my pastor, really hoping that he would talk me out of moving, because in my mind, I'm too important to the organization. If I leave, it's all going to fall apart.
Course.
And so I walk in, and I said, man, I feel like God's called me to plant a church in downtown Orlando. And he just goes, I feel like that's what God's called you to as well. And so we had 80 people move with us from Jacksonville.
Terrific.
I told my wife I felt like I had tricked all of them into moving. And so we launched 4 years ago, and We have 2 locations, one on Edgewater now at Edgewater High School and one at Howard Middle School. And just trying not to screw it up.
It's such a great, well, you referred to something that probably all people, but especially all pastors. I was a pastor for almost 50 years, and certainly this comes on you unaware. You begin to think of yourself more indispensable than you
For sure.
really are.
For sure.
And if you realize it early, that's a really good mark. But let me ask both of you this, because you're both very popular in town, and not just to your people, but everybody knows you. And you got great
so
reputation.
weird
It's true. It's true. I know everybody, and they all know you.
It's a little bit like little towns in a big city.
But how do you, as people to whom a lot of people turn and a lot of people respect, how do you make it about Jesus instead of about you? It's because it takes some effort to keep saying, no, it's not about me or our church. This is about Jesus.
Yeah.
How do you do that intentionally?
This is probably a bigger conversation for me. Is I have felt for the past, not even 4 years, but before this, that there is a different way to do church, and we're trying to figure that out. Not that one's wrong and one's right. I just feel there's a different way to do church, and I just cannot imagine that when Jesus came to establish his church, his idea was, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to find a charismatic guy, and we're going to build this whole thing around him.
Right.
And so what we've been trying to figure out is, how do you create a church in the same city that is not centered on one personality? And so even having multiple campuses, I've been very intentional from the first year that I really don't preach many more than 30 times, because I want to raise up communicators, I want to raise up leaders, and I want our church to understand that when you are able to sit and receive from any preacher and take a truth of that and apply it to your life, that's spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to help teach. And so we're really walking through this as a church, because I think we've seen so many guys where they build these churches and they build them on a personality, and it ends up consuming them, later on and whatever. And so we're trying to figure out, I had a buddy tell me, he said, I just don't think the human soul was meant to carry this. And so I've tried to be very active over the years, even when I was in Jacksonville, of pushing people away from me and pushing to the staff and pushing them to other people. And I think the thing that I've always really tried to do is just model authenticity. And I want people to look at me and say, if that idiot can follow Jesus, then I can do it too.
That's a great tactic.
And so if I can get people to say, man, I'm just a broken guy at the same thing that's trying to follow the Lord, then you can do this too. You don't need to come to me for everything. And so that's how we've tried to do it.
Renaud, how about you?
I think what we've decided to do is take a cult personality, build around it, elevate them, and roll that way. It's worked in the past, so we just we do the opposite of what you're trying to do.
I see people in Orlando with shirts with your face on them.
We try.
It just says anointed with your face. It's really cool.
It's beautiful.
It's awesome.
I think for us, from the very, very beginning of the church's life, there were 2 things that we did that we do, we literally have to do on a daily basis on our staff teams, in our volunteer teams, on our gatherings in every space, and that is to ask the question, in what we're about to do, what will make the gospel most beautiful? Instead of what will bring the most people, what will keep the most people, whatever. So if we have donuts and coffee, it's not because we think that will meet the needs of the people, it's because we think the gospel is attractive and beautiful. But then if we're going to ask people to sell all their possessions...
Can I interrupt? They do, by the way, have donuts and coffee.
We do.
They have them stacked in, it's the best. I walked into this church, I was hungry because I missed breakfast. It was awesome. I was immediately attracted to Jesus because he bought me breakfast.
But in some ways that's so true, isn't it?
Yeah.
That if I can come in and I can hide behind a little plate and a cup of coffee because the first time in church is hard, that's a gospel experience.
Yeah.
At the same time, me deciding to give more of my comfort and convenience up to engage in serving as a gospel experience. The gospel is both beautifully attractive and beautifully demanding. It both sets you free and it binds you.
Yeah.
And so the gospel is all these things. So our question is always, what will make the gospel beautiful? And if making the gospel beautiful is the consequence of diminishing the entire structure of a single person, then we'll do that. And if it is using that space for a while, we'll do that. So basically for us, it just becomes, what'll make the gospel beautiful in this next decision? We'll do that unapologetically, and whatever the consequences of that decision, they'll fall where it may.
Let me ask you this, because neither of you are high steeple people. Your lead church, or your kind of beginning church, is in a remodeled shopping center. It's a great facility. You've got a branch at Disney, or a church at Disney. You meet at Howard Middle School. What's your other?
Edgewater High School.
Edgewater High School. Okay, so you meet in a school system. You're obviously not going after traditional people who need the pews and the the altar area and so on and so forth. What are you doing specifically and purposefully to make it okay or safe or okay for people who are just a little, I'm not sure I should be at church. I'm not a church person. I'm not I don't know the Bible. Somebody's going to find me out as soon as I come in here. How do you make it okay for the people like that to come to your churches?
Yeah. I think for us, it goes back to the authenticity. I think for us, what we always try to model, and you've been to our church, like a ton of our staff, even myself, we have tons of tattoos. I mean, we look like we're fresh out of prison. And so we just want people to feel comfortable. And so a couple of the things that I'm real particular on is language that we use from stage, and making sure that I want anybody to feel like if they walk off the street, that they understand what it is that I'm talking about. And so we don't water down the sermons, we don't water down the gospel, but we make it very clear. And so I don't assume that anybody knows what I'm talking about when I reference the Bible. And then, one of the rules that we have is for our staff is we're not a green room church. Everybody's out front and everybody's talking. and a lot of our staff, and including myself, we come from seasons of being far away from the church. And so I think that we have really had this ability, because of our own brokenness and the things that we've been through, to really be able to say, oh man, I've been to church hungover. I've been to church when my life's falling apart. God loves you for this, and God loves you because you're in this. And the fact that you're pursuing Him in brokenness, I think actually says a lot about you, and God's going to work that out in you, and we're here to walk with you. And just trying to make people feel like there's nobody that's better than anybody else. We're all just on different parts of the journey, and we're all here to help each other follow Jesus.
What about you, Bruno?
Yeah, I mean, all of that. And then I think just paying attention to the experience of somebody showing up. And really it doesn't matter who it is, right? I've been to church for 20 years. I know everything. Your experience should also be one we care deeply about. And so from the time you drive into a parking lot and you're wondering what to do, the more we can remove obstacles from your path of anxiety, we want to do that. A quick, easy parking spot. Then when you walk in, there's immediately familiar people at the door that aren't the handshake people. They're just like you walk into a Target or into a Walmart or into some space, and you know who's wearing the shirt. So we have blue shirts. It says blue shirt on it. We have things that in our cultural context would be immediately familiar to you. And then the environment is couches and chairs and coffee tables all over. What we need to keep speaking is, in the life that you live Monday through Friday and Saturday, what's familiar to you will be familiar here. And then you get your donut and your cup of coffee, and the coffee's at a coffee bar where you order. So all those things. And then you don't pay, so that there's this surprise and delight. We use that term a lot. How do we surprise and delight people? By the time you walk into the sanctuary, then we do what you did. Authenticity from the stage is a really big deal. And we can preach a very, very significant and profound and verse by verse, for that matter, message without using language that someone would understand. So I always say, if a 7-year-old doesn't know what I'm saying, then I shouldn't be saying it.
Let me ask you a little bit more, though, as you talk about removing the barriers, and so you kind of negate the negative. What do you hope is a person's general spiritual journey coming into your place? Let's say somebody comes in and they've either they don't know about church, or they've been turned off to church, or they've been or they come in and say, I'm just looking for church because I was getting stale. I don't want to get stale. I want to go further in my walk with Christ. What is your kind of your meta narrative in the spiritual journey of your churches?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, we feel, I think as all churches do, specifically called to unchurched, dechurched, and non-church people. And so one of the things that we're always looking for on a Sunday morning is we're looking at, people that are getting saved. We want to see people get saved. We want to see them get baptized. And then we have just clear pathways to a bunch of different things, whether it's small groups serving, mission trips, outreaches. And what we want to see is we want to see people get involved in those at the right level for them. But then eventually we want to see them take what God has done in them and start helping other people experience the same thing that God has done. Because I think all of us know this: the best thing that can ever happen for our churches is our people's lives are changed, and they start bringing their friends and other people in their lives so that their lives can be changed too. And I think it's kind of this cyclical thing that what we want to see is we want to see people get saved, set free, and then we want to see other people help save and set free other people by leading them to Jesus. And that's kind of our big goal at the end of the day.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, when Mary and Martha were in the house with Jesus.
You were
and
so much more eloquent than I am.
No, I'm not.
Everyone,
I'm just having you speak first so that I can then take what you say and just
do not come
Boom,
to
done.
my church. Go to Mosaic. I'm like running around on stage banging
That's why these guys are here. They're just
unbelievable.
Humor is irreplaceable in the church, because it conveys a humility and a self-deferential approach that Jesus had.
Yeah.
Trueblood actually wrote a book called The Humor of Christ.
Okay.
That a lot of people miss, but I love both of you for your humility, and humor is just one way of being humble. So I'm sorry.
We don't have a lot of content in our sermons, so we have to fill it in
have to be really
with
funny
jokes.
and tell lots of stories. I do think that you do watch Jesus, and everything he did. In fact, everything God did from Genesis to Revelation is story. It's human interactions, and so I think we pay to go to movies. And we don't pay to go to school. None of my kids are like, oh, I can't wait to go to school. But man, because we were made for story. So I do agree that I think a lot of even what we're talking about right now, when people laugh and when people cry, when they're in story or in humor, we are moved here instead of here. And so if we are just a classroom for information at the church, then we will not see transformation, I think, in the depths of people's lives. And I think with Mary and Martha, you see that engagement that Jesus shows up. And every time Jesus was present, it didn't matter who you were, a Roman centurion or a Greek or a Jew. It made no difference. There was this attractional curiosity that started stirring you, that you're like, I don't get this guy. In fact, I don't even know that I like what he says, but I can't leave because there's more here. And that's what we want to do at Mosaic. I would say if somebody walks in our doors, I would hope that as they travel through the experience of a particular gathering and leave, that once they leave, they sort of think to themselves, I don't know that I agree or believe anything I just heard. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I have no idea. But here's what I do know. I think I'm loved. Like, I don't even know why I'm saying that, but I think I'm loved. And this guy that they're talking about from the stage that seems to be encountered in every place in the scripture, I can't help having this feeling like I want to go back and sit at his feet one more time, just to see. Because there's something about him that I can't get out of my soul now. And if we're preaching in a way that says, one, you're loved, you're like us, we're in the same boat. And two, this guy we hang out with, trust me, once you've hung out with him for a while, there's really a curiosity in your humanity that's stirred so deeply you can't get away from it.
Yeah, that's good.
Let me ask both of you this question. I'm going to start with you, Renaud, this time, so that Josh can play off your answer.
He's going to get all eloquent, and I'm going to have to say it first.
No, I'm not getting it. Don't worry.
I know the weight of leadership, the gravity of leadership. And both of you, as much younger men, have been bearing that for a good while. You have large congregations, and I guess when people are listening, I want them to understand that that you don't bear that alone. That you have people who encourage you. That you have somebody around you that kind of, when you're down, they kind of keep you going, because you will get down. All of us do. Love costs. That's it. I mean, it's draining, it's messy, so who is your kind of encouragement, support? I mean, who keeps you going?
Sure. So for me, that is an incredibly important question that we ask regularly. I ask regularly because, as we know, especially in the space of churches getting larger in our cultural context, there seems to be this reality that as the church gets larger, the leader ends up either doing something stupid or ending up in some place that's really hard. It's just a part of the story. So for us, as our church got larger, we're like, we have to face the fact that we are in a statistic now. And so what are we doing to make sure? And I think in many ways, initially we thought the answer was accountability. But most of the people that I've engaged with that have had hard runs, they had plenty of accountability. What they didn't have is intimacy. Intimacy with Jesus anymore, intimacy with either their spouse or their good friends, and intimacy with their biblical community. They stopped loving all those things because it just got heavy and hard. So the question we ask is, how do we produce spaces of greater intimacy? So in other words, who am I intimate with? And to be intimate with Jesus, it's all good and fine to say that's a devotional life, but the truth is, though that is helpful, that's not going to do it. I experience Jesus most through other people that love Jesus. And so I have two guys that are part of our church. One is a doctor, one is a lawyer, so it's kind of funny, pastor, doctor, and lawyer, so we make lots of jokes about that. But we gather up at least once or twice a month, usually at an Olive Garden. We are free in that space to say whatever needs to be said, to feel whatever needs to be felt, and then we drive each other back to the gospel. We all three have large families, adoptive families, and wives that carry large burdens, and so we get each other. That's a big space. My staff, very authentic with the staff. We drive deeply for that. And then I have some mentors that don't live here, that have had large churches or large ministries, that have burned out, that have failed, that have done that, and they did it when they were in their 50s, where I'm not quite yet, so they're able to say, I'm headlights for you, don't screw this up. And those guys speak into my life regularly and have permission, legitimately, this is not a joke, to pull me from the ministry. If one of those guys say to me, you got to be done, man, you're going down a place that's going to get you, I will legitimately walk away. And they know that.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because I actually, there was a pastor that fell a few years ago that I really looked up to that just freaked me out. And so I actually pulled my executive team in and my wife in and outlined the steps for them of my removal if I were to start doing something or start making decisions. But then I have 2 or 3 friends that are pastors that we've done life together for over 10 years, and we talk about everything together. And then one of my executive pastors is my best friend. He's like my little brother, and we've just, he's very smart because he knows what room he's in with me. So we can be on a fishing boat and talking about troubles in marriage, and then we can be in an office, and he understands how for me to still be his pastor but still be transparent and honest with him. And then one of the things that I do, and I've done this for 10 years, is today at 3 o'clock, I go to see my counselor.
Is that right?
Yep, I go twice a month. We actually pay for our entire staff to go to counseling because I think it's so important to stay healthy. I think it's so important. And there's so many things, not just in marriage, but in having kids and being a pastor, that you need to walk through and be transparent. And then, Stovall Weems in Jacksonville is still my pastor. And so I have a very good relationship with him. And I can talk to him really about anything, and he's there to help me to walk through it.
So I hear you both saying I have several layers of relationships that each one of them serves a valuable portion of kind of keeping me on track, but also, encouraging me, reigniting me, you know, for the
We
mission.
actually, me and I don't know if you know who Brad Lomenick is, who led Catalyst for years.
Yeah.
Brad and I started a few years ago this thing where we take 40 pastors from around the U.S. on 4 trips a year, and we bring in 3 older pastors who have fallen or made mistakes or whatever, and they just tell us all the warning signs.
Yeah.
And we do it usually
good.
out in the wilderness.
That's good.
There's no phones or anything,
Yeah.
and it's been incredible to really see it.
Well, yeah. Well, tell Brad I said hi.
I will.
You bet.
I will.
I know him from way back.
I will.
We haven't got time for one last question. And this is driving me crazy. But let me just kind of wind it up saying, you guys really encourage me because I'm on now to full-time volunteer community service. Have loved my life in the church.
Yeah.
But want to believe that the church is getting better than it ever has been. And when I look at you guys, I can believe that.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for your
No,
ministry.
thank you. That means a lot.
And guys, and people are coming to your church that honestly, in my day, would not have come to church.
Yeah.
Which is the deal.
Yep.
Because we still got churches around, you know, kind of, and they're valuable. They're
Yep,
wonderful
absolutely.
churches. And church people, and this is how they've done it for years, and it's, you know, how they'll do it until they go home and be with the Lord. But you guys are really the deal, and so thanks for coming on.
No, thank you for having
pleasure.
us.
Thanks for
I've
Yes,
loved
sir.
this. We're out of time, and I hate it, but I want to thank you and Renaud and Josh for being with us and for joining us on Power Talks. Remember, these discussions are just that. They're discussions among us. But we'd love to see you continue the discussions at home and go one step further. Get involved. Go to one of these churches if you're close to them, if you can. Because when Power Talks, you're empowered through the voice of truth. See you next time.
You just watched Power Talks, a Good Life 45 original production that makes you part of our Hope Team here on Good Life 45, where hope happens.